do that then. All right, so let me just present. So today our group will be presenting our analysis on South Korea's macroeconomic performance and their long-term growth. Starting off, we will be discussing South Korea's GDP per capita. When we look at the GDP per capita chart, South Korea notably starts off amongst the lower income countries, well behind the rest of the world. However, we can see that the distance between the rest of the world's GDP per capita and South Korea decreases as years pass by. And South Korea becomes notable for its emergence of economic development from being a low-income country to having one of the world's largest economies in just a few generations. They are rapidly becoming a high-income country with a GDP growth rate over the past 50 years that rivals comparison countries like China and even exceeds that of the United States and Japan. While we can observe that South Korea has been able to sustain a high growth rate of GDP for the past few decades, South Korea still has their focus of being able to maintain this growth rate to establish itself as a high-income country by hitting the high-income per capita mark, which is 42,130 in 2020, and to keep up with other high-income countries. Now, this maintenance of high GDP per capita can be reflected from the labor force participation and unemployment rates of Korea. Taking a look at South Korea's labor force participation graph, South Korea's labor force rate has increased a lot since 1990. While it crossed the world average in the early 2010s, South Korea is well above that of some high-income countries. Further looking at South Korea's unemployment rate graph, it seems like South Korea has a relatively consistent low unemployment rate, which indicates good utilization of its workforce. While both of these rates are consistent with the results of the maintenance of high GDP per capita, South Korea averages a rapid growth compared to some parts of the world. However, this is a different case when comparing South Korea to other high-income countries. Now, let's take a look into South Korea's productivity per worker statistics, as this lags behind that of other high-income countries, resulting in a relatively lower real GDP rate. To catch up, South Korea must learn to sustain and further improve its productivity per worker. This can be done by investing more in education and encouraging entrepreneur ventures. On top of that, what is causing South Korea to lag behind other higher income countries, a threat is South Korea's aging population and its limited geographic area and resources. Now, based on these factors, it would be hard to maintain even its current rate of productivity growth with an older population, as labor force participation would decrease. In order to address these issues, South Korea must look into adopting appropriate technologies and policies to be able to leverage more productivity per worker.
Now let's talk about South Korea's inflation rates. As we can see from the graph, since the early 1980s, like most of the rest of the world, South Korea has had an inflation rate of less than 10%. While there has been a gradual decrease in the rate of inflation, this again is something that has been seen on a global scale. The need for controlling their rate of inflation is something integral to South Korea sustainably growing and maintaining their economy. However, due to their aging population, they would need to have an increase in investment and in education and in infrastructure to maintain productivity. This would ensure that they would be able to control their production rates and maintain a stable economic growth to increase productivity per worker to the desired high-income country average. Now, coming to savings and investment, As per the data, we can observe that South Korea has been keeping its investments on par with its national savings since the 1980s. However, this has somewhat dipped in the past decade, where the investments have fallen below national savings. South Korea does a great job maintaining an investing average greater than that of high income countries in the recent decades. A steady, low volatile NCO has established South Korea as a key player in the international economy. However, it needs to invest more aggressively in education, technology, and business ecosystems if it wants to create a higher rate of sustainable growth in its per capita GDP. So that was our presentation about the economy of South Korea. As we pointed out throughout our presentation, the chief performance priority that we have identified for South Korea is to raise per capita income and increase productivity per worker. This would establish it as a high income economy. It is challenging to maintain their current rate of growth due to an aging population, but it is doable if proper technologies and policies are adopted. Thank you for listening.